Well, we want to look at another passage. We want you to see that Jesus had a firm, clear understanding of the top line, the bottom line, the upper level, the lower level, all throughout his ministry. And we're going to do that now by looking at Jesus clearing the temple. Remember when Jesus cleaned out the temple, when he overturned the money changers? All four Gospels speak of it. Matthew 21, Mark 11, Luke 19, and John chapter 2. I want to quickly read those passages and fly through them for you so you can see them and see what they say. Matthew 21. And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you made it a den of robbers." Mark 11. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, "Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you have made it a den of robbers." Luke chapter 19. And he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold, saying to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." And finally, John chapter 2. In the temple, he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins on the money changers and overturned their tables. And he said to those who sold the pigeons, take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade. Okay, what do they all have in common? Well, they were all in a temple. People were selling things. Jesus drove them out. And there were references to finances, to trade, and possibly to robbers. What's the lesson we usually learn? Here's the lesson. Don't make money in the church. Don't make the church a money-making venture. Use it to serve people. Now, that's true. That's real. But it's said with an A is greater than B perspective. It's said only with a focus on us and the church or the temple only, and not for other people. What else can we learn? What has been missing in seeing this passage and all these passages? Well, in order to understand what's missing, we need to see what happened at Solomon's dedication to the temple. Solomon, when he dedicated the temple, said some very specific things, and I want you to see them. It's found in 1 Kings chapter 8, and we read these words. "As for the foreigner who does not belong to your people Israel, but has come from a distant land because of your name, for men will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm. When he comes and prays toward this temple, then hear from heaven, your dwelling place, and do whatever the foreigner asks of you, so that the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your own people Israel, and may know that this house I have built bears your name." Now, did you notice what it did not say? It did not say, when this foreigner comes and prays towards your temple, then do not hear their prayer and make them green with jealousy that you only answer the prayers of the Jews. Solomon didn't pray that. Solomon understood as he was dedicating the temple that the temple was for not only Jews, but for people from all nations. Why? What part of the temple was he dedicating? He was dedicating the Gentile court. The Gentile court was the largest part of the temple. It was the larger outer part from the inner holy court on the inside. It was the larger outside part. And this is where the money changers were selling the pigeons and the bulls and all these various things. That's where they were selling them. And so what were they doing? They were writing off 98% of the world's population. What were they saying? God's not a God of the Gentiles. Our God is a God of the Jews only. Gentiles will never come here to find out about God or come to know God. He would never want to reach out to them. He's only the God of us, the Jews. Their whole mindset was an A greater than P perspective. It's a mindset that was rampant throughout all the Jewish people back in those days. And only one disciple caught it. Did you hear it? It came from Mark. What did he say? My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. nations. He got it. He understood that the churches that are the temple was to be a temple for all nations, and the outer court was to be dedicated to the Gentiles so that all nations could come and know and live. How does this apply to your life? You know, again, if we just get head knowledge without knowing how to apply it, we may as well go home. How does it apply? Well, it's very simple. Are our churches reaching out to the nations? Or is our church so focused on ourselves and so focused on our youth and our people and our ministry and our elders and just our people, our carpeting and our organs, that we're not worried about what's going on in the world? If so, Jesus wants to overturn some things in our churches. Jesus wants to overturn and make some major damage, do some major damage, so that we get our eyes off of ourselves and get our eyes on God's glory going to the nations. If you've not heard it before, I'll tell it to you. A healthy church is a missions-minded church. A healthy church is a church that's focused on God's global glory. Without it, you get very inwardly focused. You wind up in a very self-centered, evangelical Christianity. And you don't want that.